Welcome back to Q&A Anime. You're here with Kadir and Akil, and today we're discussing a first look at Ranking of Kings.
Yes, sir. Make sure to like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications and updates, and let's get into it.
Yes. So, some background information on Ranking of Kings. Ranking of Kings is also known as Osama Ranking. It's an anime produced by Wit Studio and authored by Sosuke Toka. So, Toka, as far as I could find, is only known for Ranking of Kings. There's a interview conducted by the Anime News Network, in which I included in the description of the video, and the author made his debut as a manga artist at the age of 41. So, never too late to chase your dreams.
I was gonna say, honestly, I don't even think that that's very uncommon, especially in the industry as a manga artist. Sometimes a lot of them end up later in life really making their debut that way, especially because it's such a hard field to get into. So
everyone has these unique comic book ideas, and only so few make it big.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm incredibly glad that this one in particular did make it big, because I am in love with this anime.
Yes, we'll get into that right in 1 second. I want to talk about the studio that's known for the animation. It's called Wit Studio, and they are a big name, actually. You're familiar with a lot of their work. The first 3 seasons of Attack on Titans, Vinland Saga, and the Netflix anime called The Great Pretender.
Yeah, I was gonna say, all of these animes are phenomenal, especially in terms of how they look visually. So I'm definitely not worried. Sometimes you hear a studio's going to be doing an anime and you're like, oh, their track record isn't great. But all of these, especially Vinland Saga, I remember Attack on Titan, I always liked the visuals for. But when Vinland Saga first came out, part of how the anime looked in general was just amazing to me. Such vibrant colors, and especially the fighting scenes. And I feel as though Wit Studio, especially in this anime too, their fighting scenes tend to really shine.
Yeah, even though they don't have powers, it still stuck out to me as something that was entertaining to watch.
Yes.
So now let's head into some of the characters. You have Bojji, the main character, who's very unique. He's deaf, mute, and he's very small. Yeah.
Kind of that typical story trope where you start off with the MC being very weak so that you can kind of play up his character growth, especially when they have big dreams or destinies in front of them.
Exactly. He gets picked on by a lot of the people in the kingdom. A lot of people working at the castle, they make fun of him or feel sorry for him. He's like the poster boy for being an underdog.
Yeah, I was gonna say, everywhere he goes, people are always, assuming he can't hear them or understand them, are always talking bad about him and talking down, saying they're surprised. They're always like, oh, he's the prince, what a waste. Always just finding ways to put him down. And Bojji, he always, despite it all, always has that smile on his face and is happily moving through life.
And speaking of moving through life, let's talk about his best friend, or I guess his soon-to-be best friend, Kage. So for those of you that don't speak Japanese, Kage means shadow. So this shadow is literally called Shadow.
He definitely is a cool side character. The fact that he makes his mouth extend from his body is kind of cool, especially the fact that through that Bojji is easily able to understand him. And the fact that for some reason he can understand Bojji, which is something no one else in the kingdom seems able to do except for those who can speak sign language.
Yeah, he has a bit of a tragic backstory as well. Apparently he's from a clan of assassins that was wiped out.
Yes, and later in the episode we actually meet a character, the one who tells us about that. It kind of elaborates more on what went down leading up to his clan being wiped out.
Yeah, and he's apparently just a kid, so
yeah,
that makes
which makes me wonder how big the grown version of the Shadows must have been.
I was gonna bring that up too. Yeah, I want to see what they look like when they're fully grown and what they're capable of. So let's go into another character. You have Daida, who is Bojji's little but more successful half-brother, and you find out that Daida's mother is Queen Hilling. So
yes.
He seems a bit arrogant. I kind of want to see what his character development's going to be like. He kind of gives me Sasuke vibes.
Yeah, Sasuke.
Yeah.
But, yeah, in terms of that kind of smugness compared to the MC, in a sense that he does kind of look down on him and think that he's way better and more suited to be, I guess, in this case, king, but in the Naruto comparison, it was Hokage. Well, honestly, they were never trying to be Hokage, but great ninja.
Yeah.
But you can definitely see that Daida, especially so because they talked about how he defeated that one member of the guard who, after getting beaten by Daida, left. and decided he was done with it because a little kid showed him up.
Let's talk a bit about the King Boss.
Yes.
So he's ranked 7th, apparently. I'm interested to see what the other higher ranked kings look like, or what their kingdoms look like. Because King Boss is incredibly huge. He's a successful warrior. Took on an army of goblins by himself.
Yes, I remember. I love that flashback scene where they talked about how, despite the odds, the humans were trying their best to fight against them. And when they saw the giant horde, they just kind of gave up and cursed their fate. And like in that moment, Boss arrived and took out the giant wave of goblins, and that was like the start of his story as he became the king of this kingdom.
By himself,
single-handedly.
So he's obviously Bojji's father. He's sick with some kind of disease, and he talks about how Bojji's mother also passed away, and how much Bojji reminds him of the late first queen.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think that was who we kind of saw. There was a flashback at the beginning of the episode as well,
right,
where we saw young Bojji kind of being talked to by who we can only assume is his birth mother.
Yeah.
And she was telling him to become a great king.
Yeah. She also looked very large, so I have a bit of hope that Bojji will develop into a large man as well, but that's just an assumption. You never know.
I was gonna say, I've unfortunately have binged almost all of this anime at this point up to what's out right now. So in terms of predictions, I don't really have too much to offer. But
jumped ahead on me. No, I'm kidding. He told me to watch this anime, so I checked it out. And Swordsmaster Damas, let's talk about him a little bit. So
yes,
yeah, from my perspective, it seems like he cares about the prince. You know, he took the time to learn sign language to communicate with him. Although he does see the prince's shortcomings as royalty, he's amazed at Bojji's prowess for combat, which we see later.
And you can also, it does generally seem like he seems to care for the prince, whereas everyone else, when they're looking at him, talking about him, you can kind of just hear and tell that they're saying it in more of a negative tone. Whereas whenever Domus is talking to or talking about him, it seems as though there's this like genuine caring for energy.
Right, which is good, because Bojji needs a mentor, because his dad's not going to be around much longer, it seems like. And then there's Bebin, who is Daida's swordmaster, and he's suspicious of Kage and wants to kill him. Why does this man have so many snakes? Gives me suspicious vibes.
Out of Orochimaru's book, honestly. He realized the wave.
He's like Orochimaru reincarnated in like the medieval century. So, initial thoughts on the first episode. It really didn't feel like any anime I've ever seen before. The main character having a disability is something that, it was really unique. It was just something that I thought was like pretty cool.
Yeah, I was gonna say, part of why I like this anime is I feel as though a lot of times anime are always trying to like fit that classic mold of what's considered a good anime. You know, traditional anime graphics, you have to have a certain power system in the world. There needs to be like big flashy fights, and I feel as though Ranking of Kings does that differently in the sense that they have a fantastic story and they decided to take a less traditional route, different anime style than what's normal. You know, the power system doesn't seem to be crazy compared to anything else off the rip, at least.
Yeah.
And on top of that, it is the fact that the character has a disability. I mean, like in terms of anime, that's so rare. The only one I can really think of is one that was Dororo, where the main character he was missing arms and legs, but he had like swords instead that were covered by prosthetics. But even then, I don't know if I've seen one that's to the extent that Bojji's is, where it interferes so much with his everyday life, like he can't even communicate with most people.
Yeah, and you have anime like My Hero Academia, where the main character didn't have a quirk, but that wasn't really like a disability. That was just like something that, it was a mechanic built into the show that isn't really unique to everyday life.
I was going to say, especially because it is true in My Hero Academia that people wouldn't have powers. It was just incredibly uncommon. So rather, it was just an unlucky thing. Like you were unlucky to be born without a quirk. But besides that, he's relatively normal.
Yeah. So it seemed like a very like childish anime at first with the animation style. And I had my skepticism as to whether I'd be into it. But it definitely like grew on me like as I was watching. And I was surprised by my opinions at the end of the show, because going into it, I was like, this doesn't really seem like something I'd be interested in. And I definitely judged the book by its cover.
Yeah, and sometimes, you know, it does take that initial let me see it a little deeper than what my preconceived ideas of it might be.
Exactly.
And so, and you know, sometimes that's how you find these amazing gems that most people end up missing, because you decide to take a chance on something and not judge it by its cover, and you see just how amazing it can really be.
Yeah, I'm glad something like this is taking off, because it's definitely different from most anime that we've seen now, and it's something that I think it will have a great impact on people's preconceived notions of being deaf or mute, and it could only help society, basically.
Yeah, honestly, I love the fact that, like, especially anyone who might have disabilities like those could see this character and see a main character who they can vibe with, you know? Like, a lot of times you're like, oh, like, you'll like things about a character such as their personality, their determination and stuff, but you might not necessarily be able to connect with them in the same way other people do. And so the fact that now someone can be like, well, I see someone who's like me, who's achieving these amazing things, it can definitely give them hope and change their view on, like, themselves and letting what other people think get to them.
Exactly. And with that, let's go into the plot of the first episode. So, I mean, the episode started with Bojji walking through the town in his underwear.
Yeah, getting laughed at by the crowd, of course.
Yeah, and so this is a future scene, because before that, he was robbed by Kage, and that's why he was walking through the town without any clothing on. Then he goes back to Kage the next day and gets robbed again.
Yeah, and he even brings more clothes for Kage to take from him.
Yeah, I guess that was the only way he felt like he could initiate a interaction with Kage.
Maybe, and also because I'm sure, like, the fact that because he was talking when he found out Kage could talk to him, he said, "Wow, you really get me," and Kage was like, "I was making fun of you, dummy," but it's true. Like, most people, he found someone who he feels genuinely gets him. Yeah,
because, you know, Bojji stands out, and I guess Kage also stands out because Kage isn't around people like him or anything else like him. So I guess it's just two people that stand out getting along. The next day when Bojji runs back, well, first let's talk about their initial chat. So Bojji tells Kage that he wants to become the highest ranked king, and, you know, with that, the goal of the series gets established. Kage made fun of Bojji, but Bojji's definitely, like, sticking to his guns on that dream. Kind of like how Luffy wants to be.
And at some point, I think Kage kind of just relents to him in the sense that he's like, okay, like, when that happens, like, make the world a fun place to live in. I'll be looking forward to it.
Yes. And so I wonder how Kage fits into his goal, because it'll be weird having an assassin get him to a high-ranking king, you know? Because assassins are looked down on, usually.
That is true, but I do remember that when Bebin was talking with Kage, he mentioned that the assassins used to be, they used to work for the kingdom of Bo, whichever kingdom that is. And so we do kind of learn that at some point there was a king, not sure where he ranked on the ranking, but he definitely did use the assassins. So True. It's possible that maybe Bojji, later on, Bojji might end up needing to use Kage's assassin services or abilities.
You think Bojji would put a hit out on somebody?
I don't even think Bojji would. I think Kage would just decide that it has to happen.
That's fair enough. As we see Bojji run back, you see that Kage's following him, and Kage sees a day in Bojji's life. He sees that he gets picked on by kids, scolded by the queen, and then the scene where he sees him cry when he gets back to his room. And I think this is, like, one of the most important scenes, because despite Bojji putting on this smile and this front, he is human, and he does go through these emotions. And even though he can't hear what people are saying, the words still hurt, you know? It's
admirable, really, the fact that he still tries to stay so strong despite it all.
I like that, because it shows the strong qualities of a leader and the future king of the kingdom.
Yes, definitely.
And then, unfortunately, Kage runs into Bebin.
I'm not sure. I wonder if maybe he has some sort of deeper connection to the assassins of the Shadow Clan, because he recognizes him immediately, and it seems as though Kage traveled around relatively easily in the first episode without being recognized as an assassin of the Shadow Clan. So I'm wondering if maybe the extermination of their people was covered up some.
Maybe. I'd have to watch more. You probably already know the answer, but we'll make
I
a
was gonna
follow-up
say they
video.
actually didn't get too much into the Shadow Clan where I'm at. So that's still one of the big mysteries of the series is more about that.
Oh, good. Good to know that I won't be spoiled by you at all.
Yes.
And then the next scene, we see that Bojji meets his father. So Boss tells Bojji he can become much stronger, and he tells him he reminds him so much of the late First Queen, like we mentioned earlier. And you kind of see that the king coughs up blood, so you know that whatever is affecting the king, it's probably gonna run its course soon, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's one point where he's talking to Bojji as he's holding like Bojji's hand, and he talks about how he loves him so much, but he's worried about the future of the kingdom once he's gone because how weak Bojji is.
Yeah, if only he could be around much longer, but it doesn't seem like he's gonna be around to see Bojji turn into the king I'm hoping he becomes. You know, we'll see. So next, Kage meets Bebin, and then throws a dagger at him and runs away. And then it gets into what you mentioned, Bebin said about the Shadow Clan, how the Shadow Clan never betrays someone it picks as a ruler. So it's important for understanding how Kage will remain loyal to Bojji, I think.
Yeah, and I wonder if there maybe like I said, there's still so much we don't know about the Shadow Clan, and so maybe is there some kind of underlying layer behind it in the reason why they won't betray someone they picked as a ruler, in a similar sense to the Ackermans in Attack on Titan.
That's true. I didn't even think about that. All these connections.
Yeah.
So the next scene, you see Bojji training with Damas.
I'm gonna say, I feel like training is kind of a light word. I think Domus definitely can tell that Bojji doesn't have as much in him as it would take to train him seriously. And so a lot of what we see is just kind of Bojji. It almost looks as if he's playing with the practice sword while Domus is actually training. When
Data appears on the scene, Domus gets excited about the potential he sees in Data and how Data, fought one of Bebin's top men and crushed him, I guess.
Yeah. And even when he was fighting with him, he was talking about how good his sword fighting ability was.
Yeah, but I see that he doesn't really have the qualities that I think Bojji has that would make him a good leader. Like, you remember when Damas was going to help Dida up when he beat him at the end, and Dida just kind of ignores his hand, and it just seems like he's full of contempt after being beaten. I was going to say,
yes, that same arrogance, the fact that he was mad that he lost, even though it's acceptable that he lost. He was taking on one of the best sword fighters in his kingdom, best sword fighter in the kingdom.
Yeah.
So the fact that he lost is nothing surprising, but it still upset him so much because I feel like it's not necessarily a bad thing. I can tell that he wants to reach greater heights and become strong and be a great king as well. Right. But at the same time, I feel as though he takes it too far to the point where he ends up emulating a lot of bad traits in his desire to grow stronger and gain more power.
Yeah. And so let's talk about the last scene in which Dida goes against Bojji. So I think this scene is what wrapped it up for me. I was like, oh, this is actually pretty good.
Yeah, especially because there was the one guard who was watching from the tower who asked who do you think is gonna win, and everyone's like, oh, it's gonna be Dida. And he says, well, I'm not so sure. Yeah. And you see the flashback where he sees Bojji being surrounded by the snakes and then dodging every single one. And a snake mine, it's not like snakes are slow or anything. They are quick. And he was dodging multiple of them like it was nothing.
Yeah, and from close range too. He was just sidestepping and ducking and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it was incredible. And so when everyone was seeing this skill of his in action, everyone's watching them try to fight, and they see Bojji manage to dodge every one of Dida's blows. They're so impressed, I guess. They're honestly at a loss for words at the fact that Bojji was even that capable. And then Bojji hits Dida. Everyone's astonished. Everyone in the castle's like, what? Yeah. But it seems as though, when Domus and Dida were fighting, you could tell that there was the heaviness behind their hits that was intended to, disable their enemy. Yeah. Whereas, Bojji, and we can see that Bojji was always struggling with, strength in terms of pushing open the door when he went to go see his father and in general in his training. And so even though he lands that hit, I'm sure that his lack of strength is still something that would make him not as good of a king candidate in the eyes of the rest of the people.
Yeah, but now hopefully their doubts have been assuaged a little bit, because you see that Bojji has his potential, especially in combat at least, and I think that's a big thing given their current world, in their world at least, because it seems like there's a lot of like other threats that could harm the kingdom.
Yeah, and especially because the ranking of kings system is like what decides your power in this world, I guess. And they talk about how the king's strength, like the prosperity of his people, the king's strength, and how close they come to being a hero in terms of their power, is one of the things that determines your ranking on the king's list. So
yeah, and this scene was also important because it seems like Kage believes in Bojji for the first time. Because the first time it was kind of reluctant. He was like, yeah, you'll be a good king. But now he's like, oh, he actually has what it takes.
Yeah, he saw him. He was like, he's quick with it. Okay. He's like, oh boy, I've got a little skill.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that I really liked seeing as well. Because it seems like everybody doubts Bojji and they might think it's a fluke. But you always know that Kage will have Bojji's back from that point on.
Absolutely.
And with that, I kind of want to get into like the final thoughts on the episode, predictions, and what we're looking forward to. So, do you want to give your party, Keel?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first watched this first episode of the anime, I was really unsure how I felt about it, especially because it was like doing the same reasons why I do kind of like it now are the reasons why I was unsure about it at the beginning. The difference in animation style, the fact that it did kind of have that childish vibe you were talking about at the beginning. And so I just wasn't sure, but I'm so glad I stuck out because the story really did draw me in, especially in that last scene at the end of the first episode. I was like, I need to see more, and I ended up binging the rest. And so yeah, I ended up binging all the episodes, and I was so glad that I did because it blew me away over and over, time and time again. I was just blown away by this story, where it went, the way that they kind of expanded the world, the way, without giving away too many spoilers, the way that Bojji grows, I guess, is so different than what I see most anime do. And so I was just like, this is amazing. Like, I just love being able to see something that evokes those same feelings that like some great anime do for me in such a different way.
That's awesome. I'm excited to get more into it. So like, my initial reaction was definitely subverted at the end. I was totally drawn into the anime. Like when I saw the final match with Bojji and Daida. I was predicting that Daida will be like Bojji's main antagonist as they compete for the throne. And of course, I think that there's going to be a faction supporting Bojji and a faction supporting Daida. And Daida's seems very large right now, which makes me all that more excited to see, because Bojji's coming in as an underdog. It's obvious he's going to get like more and more help. And I can't wait to see Bojji's growth. And so with that, I guess we can end it there, and I'll be looking forward to watching the rest of Ranking of Kings.
Make sure to leave a comment down below if you check out Ranking of Kings. Let us know what you think, any predictions you may have, and as always, Q&A out.
Q&A out.